ngatawa kene manali nobe nganshilubile ine mwifube fube Ninebo iveli liobe ngawandile fienge nkumba Tomba iwe washane kango mume kukasuma Atawa kene manali nobe
I'm right here in the town of Mongu, and beautiful space. There's a lot of activity going on in terms of economy. People are doing money transfers and all that. And I do know that right here, there's a lot of social life going on and economic life going on. But there is one interesting side of life, and that is the part of life where you have people living with albinism. And we would like to find out if most of these people do have a social life and if they also do have an economic life that is going on.
Imagine a fellow human being chopping off a fellow human being's hand just because of the difference of skin type. I feel it's not fair. It's not worth it.
My name's Senda Gashweka. Yes.
Senda, you look very young, and I must say here sitting with you, it makes me have pleasure because you completed school recently.
Yes.
How was it?
Was good.
It was good?
Was good, but again was bad.
What happened?
Because what was happening, where I was schooling, they haven't care of us blinds and yes. Neni batakulinie kwa college, chwe bashemi baka, bona hakuna seba iswalezi. En hakuna baba nilifela cause voma batimezi kale mana nibazibini kubaziba. En so hakuna nekena hakuna nieza ndi support. So neka nibonalanga hande chwana kimu kwafa kuli yo afumana mutu afumana ska wakufa kona nibonala hande chwana.
Mwina ngomani?
Nina ni ma parents baka but nina ni ma step mother baka. Ni ma step en.
Albinism is profoundly misunderstood socially. Women who give birth to children with albinism are often rejected by their husbands and their families. The disabilities people living with albinism may have as a result of their skin condition make some people even push unfounded beliefs that they may be a source of misfortune to their families and the community. While it is so clear to see these social and economic inequalities subjected on people living with albinism, it is even more clearer and heartbreaking that very little is being done to include people with albinism in viable social and economic activities. Superstition about people living with albinism foster marginalization and exclusion from various social and economic activities. The deeply entrenched prejudices they face also impede them from accessing adequate health care, social services, legal protection, and redress for human rights abuses.
When it's a writing time, they don't nebasala tikulufa nga mabooks
nekusina mabooks kuli amung'ola manto yale
manotsi abalufi and then fale abang'ola batufale bang'ola fa board esi luna ni short sight fa board file luna lubonka but baitusa kubuleranga
kuli ababulera mwang'ola
baza dictate kapa
kono nako again
but kapa even chikucha bazi dictate bambula fa kuli mina mukang'ola mu amanotsi abalikani bamina so
aubuza buka mulikana akufi
fuku mwaka kupa buku mulikana hawa akufi so ne take nganga all time kuli fuku mnosa bangini manotes.
So the interaction where persons with albinism are interacting with the society, there is a lot of discrimination. We have stories where children who are in schools, they tell us stories that when they are put in groups to do group works, other children shun away from this child. So imagine a class where they are doing group works, but this person is just alone because no one is willing to be with them. Others, they run away from the desks. You know, this desk where you have to sit 2 or 3 people, and you go to a class, you find a child with albinism is sitting alone because all the pupils are afraid, they're discriminating this child. So the interaction, and it goes further even into employment. When this person grows up, he wants to get employment, he wants to marry. There is kind of discrimination where the family says, well, you can't get married to this kind of a person. So it goes further and further and further, and this is why the welfare of people with albinism is not very good because of the stigma that surrounds it.
Okay, I remember, I would say when I was in my 5th grade, in my 5th grade, that I can't forget though. So I got into a school. I was so anxious to go to a private school by then. So after going to a private school, you get into a class, then you just see you are totally different from others. It's like, okay. Then after being introduced to the class, I was given a seat. Then afterwards, after the teacher walked away from the class, then everyone went on one side. So I used to think, but why? But why me? Why am I being treated like this? Yeah.
Ninevo iveli lyobe ngawandile fyenge nkumba nomba iwe washaneka ngomume kukasuma.
As a Human Rights Commission, we are very concerned at the rights of persons with albinism. The rights to life of persons with albinism have been under constant attack. They are being targeted for spare body parts and ritual killings, where there are these myths amongst members of society who think if you can get a limb or any part of a person with albinism, you can use it for certain rituals, either for riches or any other rituals, which is a myth. That's not true. We have also persons with albinism who are being sexually abused in some cases, because people believe that they can cleanse themselves of certain ailments or whatever misfortune if they got in contact with persons with albinism. Now, those are serious human rights violations, which as a Human Rights Commission, we are concerned, and we've been following up cases of persons with albinism being murdered, and we ensure that the culprits are brought to book, that the police, because it's a serious crime, they follow up those cases and people are arrested. But also we've been calling for effective protection of persons with albinism. We've been working with associations dealing with the rights of persons with albinism to ensure that they secure the safety of their members that are victimized. But also at the socio-economic front, we have been very much concerned at the exclusion and marginalization of persons with albinism. We have noted that although Zambia has got a national disability policy of 2015, its implementation is lacking, and that sometimes persons with albinism are lost in the umbrella of persons with disabilities, because that's where they fall under that category. So you find that they are within the category of persons with disabilities. They are discriminated, they are excluded when interventions are required. For instance, in terms of employment and labor relations, they are not employed in most areas. So as a commission, we really call for an affirmative action from the government under the Ministry of Labor, that they should provide a quota system, for instance, in the public and private sector, that those employers should provide opportunities for persons with albinism, and that government through the Ministry of Finance should provide incentives, tax incentives for people who employ persons with albinism or any other disability, to encourage them to provide those services. So the government has to really show practical steps to ensuring that persons with albinism are protected, are supported, they are provided with a social protection measures when they are providing these empowerment funds. That's a category of our fellow citizens which should be prioritized. So we have all these empowerment measures and programs which are eluding the persons with albinism. They are not being supported, regardless of the fact that they are one of the most vulnerable categories of people in Zambia. So economically, socially, they are very vulnerable, and also their physical security is also not guaranteed. So we have a lot of challenges as a country that we need to provide. For instance, I'll tell you that even just to get sunscreen, that gel for persons with albinism, is a challenge for most of those people. That's an obligation by the Ministry of Health. They are supposed to provide, sunscreen to persons with albinism, free eye screening services to persons with albinism, and all those challenges persons with albinism are facing. They should be granted with bursaries. When you're talking about bursaries, that's in a category of persons in Zambia. You should be prioritizing that persons with albinism, they should be granted bursaries to go to tertiary education so that they can eventually be employed and be self-sustainable in the labor market. So there are a lot of issues as a country we need to do to ensure that the livelihood of persons with albinism is enhanced or promoted.
The many forms of social and economic inequalities faced by persons with albinism are interrelated. Their rights to education, for instance, is affected by their vision impairment that can force them to drop out of school or lose business and employment opportunities. With a population of more than 25,000 people living with albinism in Zambia, one would expect that the government, corporate and business community would take a keen interest in including them in viable social and economic activities. It is sad to note that a good number of people with albinism live life of hope on a tight string, without surety of where the next meal will come from.
It is actually quite ironic that as a society, especially in the recent past, we have been very harsh at judging other parts of the world for the systemic racism that we have seen. In recent months, we have seen a lot of that. Now, we are pointing fingers at others when just here at home, we are discriminating against persons living with albinism in our own families where the discrimination is actually initiated. I think that we need to tackle it there first and very strongly. And when children leave their homes to go to school, school authorities should be able to take much firmer stances against any incidences of children that are being discriminated against because of their because of them being living with albinism. When it comes to employment, there are so many things that happen there, and it's complex. When you are a person living with albinism, you try and walk into an interview. People, in fact, being invited to an interview in the first place, you are going to be lucky. But when you get there, you find so many barriers. You get lucky to get that job. Colleagues that you are supposed to work with don't even want to have lunch with you. So the way we have crafted our employment laws, the way we conscientize employers in the various associations that they have, we must be able to help them understand that persons with albinism have the ability and the brains and the competencies that every other person has. So when it comes to the employment laws, we must be able to see to it that this is taken care of and people who are employing conscientized. There is something else that is very crucial about what government also needs to do in the long term. When you try to understand how society behaves, you must look for institutions that can help you champion that. I think that government needs to try and sit at a table with a lot of critical stakeholders, including the media who by their nature are important in terms of shaping the behaviors and the things that societies do, to try and come up and relook the frameworks that we have for policies and laws to see where the opportunities lie for us to do much more to be able to make sure that the status of persons living with albinism is improved in this country.
Naife ndise bantu vaenekera kufakirako nzeru sikuti atsendise ndrama astisiyana. We are just the same. There's no difference between an albino and a black person, no. Vamai vatu vanatibala ni ma blacks, na vatate ni ma blacks, na vana vetri navo ni ma blacks. So is there any difference? So vabo matipempa vafakireko nzeru vamashita neglect kumanchito na ivi vopaya vogulisa kulibe mtu amene ati mwabwino ugulise awe anakupasa anavauza soni ndani vati kutisamo chabe
nendane kanu mweso mwana wako kona pungwa Adamu talekele sheva kuluba eka mwandi ngatwa ilefe bonse ngatwa lubile.
There's a lot of rights are being violated here, and our organization we take the human rights approach. Our vision is to see that persons with albinism enjoy their human rights on equal basis. So some of the rights which are being violated are the right to education. When a child is denied to be at a school because of color, a teacher says, no, I cannot teach this child, or people feel like, no, this person doesn't belong to this class. So there is a right to education that is being violated. There is also the right to health that is being violated. So persons with albinism, they require some health assistance. Government has to provide sunscreen to them. So when government fails to do that, to give them sunscreen, their right to health is being violated because they're supposed to receive that. There's also the right, the worst thing is the right to life, which is taken from them, because in the end, they are hunted and killed for their body parts, just because there is a misconception that their body parts can be used to acquire wealth or to bring power. So for that reason, they lose their lives, and their right to life is cut short because of the misconception.
Life is a bit hard. It is a bit hard dealing with the others, and as people living with albinism, we are unable to to work well or to cope with life, especially to do with other people. So, coming to social, we are unable to socialize with the others because of the skin color. In the head of the normal person, the so-called normal, to them what they know is that this skin color, it is considered from way back as a case starting from the family, the community, and the nation at large. So there are a lot of challenges which people living with albinism are facing because of the same thing. People consider as our skin as a case. It is an insult to the family, to the community.
How does that make you feel? Because it's not right.
We do not feel okay. We do not feel okay, to tell you the truth.
When it's raining like this, sometimes rains, but let me say it's humid.
Yes, the weather is cooler.
The weather is cool, yeah. So in that one, activities at work, they keep on going. So I feel that is where I am supposed also to come in to be recognized. Not to just recognize me as when I'm at the office, but when there's division of labor. To say maybe we are receiving someone, for example, the president, for example, other superiors. There are such activities, you are left out. I feel the same blood, the red blood, that runs through my veins. It's the same that runs through yours. So I don't see any difference. It's just the difference of the complexion. As for the blood, is the same. At least if the blood was green or yellow, I was going to say perhaps that's what makes them make such mega money they say they make. Yeah.
Even as we were battling the corona issue, where the pandemic came, it affected everyone who were busy trying to survive corona, and yet people were still after our body parts. And this year we have lost some people. We just buried a person who was killed in Eastern Province, brutally murdered, hands chopped off, eyes plucked out, the tongue, everything moved in the period of corona. So we are not resting. And to make things worse, we are hunted dead or alive. So even when you die, you are buried, they still come after the carcass. They dig out the grave, they take your body, they cut some body parts. So they believe that even if you are dead, your body parts too have power. So we have got, even this year, we have recorded about 2 grave robberies where people have gone to the grave and dug out a body of a person with albinism.
Okay, so when we look at the percentage in the organization, we have about 2% of those who are working in the government, of which the rest are just trying by all means to be entrepreneurs, trying by all means to do their own thing, which says a lot about about our country, and it says a lot about how people view disability. Because at the end of the day, this person is a qualified teacher. Why are they not employed? And so it's really hard and tough for them, because they have and they feel that impact that we are not people and we are not being chosen because we look this way, because I'm this way. And so we have tried as an organization to create a safe space for the mothers with children with albinism, to give them small startup loans to at least start up a small business or run something that can help fend for their families, because we understand that it's not every time that the organization has, and it's not every time that we can sponsor a kid to school. So if a mother is also running something by the side, it's going to help them.
Albinism, in terms of how people in society generally perceive persons living with albinism, is a key part of what inequality looks like in Zambia. So when you consider the faces of inequality, albinism is one such area that shows you that a society is unequal based on the different treatment that is given to persons that are living with albinism. In 2017, you remember the gruesome cutting off of a hand of a young woman somewhere in Muchinga, or is it Eastern Province, just because of how she looked. And so for us, a society that discriminates, discrimination is a starting point of inequality.
Well, I mean, majority of persons living with albinism, we are somehow limited in our way we socialize. You know, because even when we're growing up, we can tell that we're different. When we're growing up, we're told to look out for ourselves at the back, you know, and you expose this person living with albinism to their academic lifestyle, and then they find this environment where they're trying to fit in. Then there's this aspect of discrimination. I think we need a legislature that is going to be put in place to look at these scenarios and these situations, because just me here talking, it might help, but it can only go thus far. But then we need our representatives that are in the political sphere or in parliament to put up some legislation in the Ministry of Education, which will look at the well-being of persons living with albinism. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember me going to grade 8. I met a very good friend of mine, Walia, may he so rest in peace. He talked to me, he said, he brought up his problem. So we had to sit down and try to put things together. So he said, no, look, I have a heart problem. And it's not everyone that is going to want me every time. You are living with albinism. It's not everyone that is going to accept you the way you are. So we had that friendship talk, you know. I considered him as a brother that I never had, because he told me facts that even now I still think of, just to look where I'm coming from and where I am now. Yeah. So he got to talk to me and said, no, even if people talk about you, even if people talk about how you look or what you are, just accept it. That's the only thing that you're going to do. Accept. So from there, I just said, no, okay. I accept. I can't change myself. I can't do anything. It's gonna be me still. So I said, okay, cool. This is me now.
Let me run with it.
Yeah.
Because of lack of employment, thus, most of them live in poverty due to various social and economic related inequalities. Proper medical care is important for the people living with albinism in order for them to have their fair share of the country's economic cake. It is sad that very few, if any, corporations have taken it upon themselves as part of their corporate responsibility to provide proper medical care or, on merit, employ people living with albinism to help end their economic inequalities.
What is required is more sensitization to the people. More sensitization to the people. They must know what albinism means and what we require as people living with albinism. It is not the color, but it is about the skin. We are able to breathe, and we are able to bleed, we are able to socialize just like you are. We are able to do anything that any person can do. Apart from what hinders us is the inability of our skin to do hard things.
Actually, for me, I only want to make a difference. I only want to make a difference in a situation whereby I need to make it clear to other people that we are not different, but we are the same. If you're a man, I'm also a man.
That's it.
You understand? So now, I want to speak to somebody out there to understand that being an albino or having someone who is living with albinism, I want them to feel, you know, that specialness. Yeah, that specialness. I don't want, because you get to live with someone in the house, then they're not given freedom to do something. You understand?
That's it.
Yeah. So it hurts when other people are doing things, then you are he was seconded.
Yes, you're like excluded.
Yeah, you understand. So it doesn't make sense. It hurts. So I want to rub that hurtness from somebody out there.
Well, one thing we can never take away from is the fact that us persons living with albinism have got a very, very poor sight, and hence we require spectacles like my brother right there for us to see visually properly. I remember there was this one time at work, we had a project, because initially this is what we do when we have a project and then we need to go out in the fields and do our work. And one of my colleagues went like, no, don't take him. He's just going to make our work very difficult because of his sight. And moreover, why should you take him? You are just going to expose him to the sun, you know, and so on. And I really felt very low, because I was like, I even asked God, like, okay, you've given me this skin color, as if though it's not enough, and then you add up a visual impairment. Like, it's hindering my progress, you know. Yeah, then again I thought things through. Here I am.
Well, the statistics show that there is a very low turnover, very low people, low numbers in terms of education. The numbers are very low. Very few persons with albinism have completed school. Many of them are dropouts. Many of them have not completed school. Some of them is because of the challenges at family level. They are rejected, the fathers rejected them, so there's no one to pay for their school. Others is because of the stigma in schools, so they drop out. But this also affects the employment, because of the poor grades, because of the lack of qualifications, they cannot get good jobs. So many of them will just end up being teachers and being self-employed because they didn't complete school. When a job opportunity comes out, they are not qualified. They can't be doctors, they can't be these other higher professionals. That's why up to now, Zambia, we have just recorded one medical doctor. But that does not mean that persons with albinism cannot become doctors. So it's because of the lower levels of education which affect employment in future.
It's because of the discrimination. That's the reason why a lot of persons with albinism have got low self-esteem. You can just imagine the family sometimes might treat you in the other way. Then you look at the outsiders also treating you in the other way. You feel like you're not at home. You feel unsafe, you know. So at the end of the day, you find that a lot of persons with albinism, they don't have that capability of trying to come out, you know, trying to express themselves, because the environment around them it's not conducive. But nevertheless, I believe you have to trust yourself.
The business community seems to have less, if any, business engagements with people living with albinism. People with albinism deserve proper medical care, jobs, education, business opportunities, and a better place in their communities. Beyond myths and within their rights, people with albinism are human beings. They deserve to have their rights to life and security protected, as well as their right not to be subjected to torture and ill treatment. While some investigation and prosecution seem to take place, sentencing seems to be rare. Victims face significant difficulties in bringing their cases to justice, fearing repeated attacks or further stigmatization.
We have noticed that with the cases of either them being mutilated or killed, certain cases, as you mentioned, the police, because these are crimes against humanity, we have noticed that certain cases just die out As a commission, how does that make you feel, and what is it that we should do to make sure that perpetrators are brought to book, like you said?
Definitely. We've been concerned as a Human Rights Commission, and we've been following such cases, and in most cases we've found that police officers have been facing difficulties in terms of securing evidence. You know, when the case of that gravity takes place, the evidence should be beyond any reasonable doubt. As you may be aware, the police now, the prosecution has been taken away from the police to the National Prosecution Authority, and the National Prosecution Authority will always assess the authenticity or adequacy of the evidence gathered, and where the evidence is lacking, they know that this has no legs to stand in the courts of law. They advise them to get more evidence or to talk to other people. So in some cases, because some of these cases will find that they're happening at night, and they're just hearsay kind of evidence where you are just suspecting people.
Our next target is also to engage the judiciary, because Zambia police does not prosecute. So we are targeting the judiciary to engage them so that these cases that are coming that affect persons with albinism, they are prosecuted. We are concerned why they take too long and why they die a natural death. But also, if you look at it closely, it gives you the nature of what kind of attacks they are. So we can categorize them in organized crimes. These are organized crimes. They involve so many players. There is this part, there are the attackers, those who attack. There are the advisors, those who advise what kind of parts are needed. There is even a close member of the family. They even work with close people to that person. And then also there is a mastermind, the person who is behind and financing, sponsoring all these things. So there are so many players involved. And as an organization, we are moving towards engaging them as stakeholders. We want to engage the judiciary. We also want to engage the traditional healers, the ngangas, because they play a part in these cases.
The right to freedom from discrimination, social and economic inclusion requires governments to adopt comprehensive strategies to ensure that persons with albinism are afforded equal protection under the law and deliberately included in all social and economic activities. Because of many unfounded beliefs that people living with albinism are magical beings or ghosts, they are mutilated or even killed, and their body parts are used for witchcraft rituals. Beyond the myths and within their rights, people with albinism are human beings. The social and economic inequalities inflicted on them must come to an end. The Zambian government, civil society, the community, and the private sector must develop deliberate social and economic empowerment programs for people with albinism. Social services such as proper health care and education must be availed to the people with albinism, as it is clear that they are interrelated in ending their social and economic inequalities. In Zambia, people with albinism are citizens, and just like every other person in your community, school, leadership position, or any workplace, people with albinism deserve a full share of all social and economic rights.
There's no need to discriminate people. There's no need to start treating people differently. We are all able to do different things, and we should look above the skin, because they all have the capability to do something, and they're humans too. So all I can say is that no human is illegal, and we are all the same.
Nomba iwe washaneka ngomu mume kukasuma atawankene manali nove ashinu bile ine mwefuve fuvene nendane kanu mweso omwana wankoko na pungwa Adamu talekele sheva kuluba eka mwandi Ngatwa ile fe bonse Ngatwa lubile fe bonse Ichilubo chumfwika bwino ngamule chipanga bonse Ngatawankene Nganali nobe Ngashilubile Ine mwifuve fuvele Ngabanandi balaluma gushiku Inende luba kachelo